The number on the screen was a flat, uncompromising zero, not a single cent. I blinked, thinking the banking app must be glitching. I refreshed. Still zero. My heart began a frantic thrum against my ribs. This was my college fund, $18,452. Every dime earned from 3 years of greasy diner aprons, late night shelf stocking, and mind numbing data entry. My name is Sophia, and that money was my ticket out, my path to a degree, to a life I'd meticulously planned. I grabbed my phone, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it, and stumbled out of my small bedroom. Mom Aurora was in the kitchen humming as she wiped down the counter. Dad Wallace was at the table, engrossed in the newspaper, a half-eaten bowl of cereal pushed to the side. Mom? Dad? My voice was thin, reedy. Aurora turned, a smile on her face that faltered when she saw mine. What is it, dear? You look like you've seen a ghost. My college account, I managed, holding up the phone with the damning zero displayed. It's it's empty. All of it. It's gone. Wallace lowered his paper, his expression unreadable. Aurora's hand went to her throat. There must be some mistake, Aurora said, but her eyes darted to Wallace, a flicker of something I couldn't decipher passing between them. Is there? I pressed, looking at my father. Dad? He sighed, folding the newspaper with deliberate slowness. Sophia, sit down. I didn't want to sit. I wanted to scream. What happened to my money? Now, don't get hysterical, Wallace said, his tone already setting my teeth on edge. It wasn't your money, not really. We let you keep it in an account with your name on it. But what? I choked out, the room starting to feel too small. I earned every penny of that, for college. My tuition deposit is due next week. About that, Wallace said, finally meeting my gaze. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I so desperately craved. An opportunity came up, a really promising one, for Renee. Renee, my older brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, despite a string of half-baked schemes and a chronic aversion to actual work. What does Renee have to do with my college fund? I asked, a horrifying suspicion dawning. He needed capital for his new venture, Wallace explained as if discussing the weather. A sure thing this time. He's going to make us all rich. Aurora wrung her hands. It's a wonderful idea, Sophia. He's so excited. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. You gave him my money, my college money. It's an investment, Sophia, Wallace corrected, his voice hardening. In your brother's future. He's the one with real potential, you know. He needs this kind of backing. He's the one with real potential. The word struck me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. All my straight A's, my debate club trophies, my acceptance letters from good universities, they meant nothing. My dreams, meticulously built on minimum wage and instant noodles, were just collateral for another of Renee's fantasies. And what about my potential? I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a chilling emptiness. What about my future? Wallace waved a dismissive hand. You're smart. You'll figure something out. Community college, maybe, or take a year off. A year off? I stared at him, then at Aurora, who was now studiously avoiding my gaze, her silence a deafening affirmation of Wallace's cruelty. You stole my future, and you're telling me to figure something out? Don't be dramatic, Sophia, Wallace snapped. Family helps family. Renee is going to put us on easy street. You should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute. Grateful. The word was a bitter pill. I looked from my father's impassive face to my mother's averted one. The betrayal was a chasm, deep and absolute. They hadn't just taken my money, they had taken my worth, crushed it under the heel of their blatant favoritism. I didn't say another word. I couldn't. I turned and walked back to my room. their voices a dull murmur behind me. The acceptance letters lay on my desk, crisp and hopeful. University of North Carolina, Boston College. My dream, right there on paper, now just a cruel reminder of what would never be. Tears streamed down my face, hot and angry. I sank onto my bed, the zero on my phone screen burning into my retinas. They had chosen. They had decided my brother's latest whim was more important than my entire future. The crying eventually subsided, leaving behind a hollow ache. But as the hours of that night bled into the pre-dawn gray, something else began to stir in the emptiness. A cold, hard knot of resolve tightened in my chest. They thought I was nothing, a stepping stone for their precious son. They thought I would just roll over and accept this. I picked up the useless acceptance letter from my top choice school, the embossed crest mocking me. My fingers clenched around it, crinkling the expensive paper. No, I wouldn't be broken. I wouldn't figure something out in the way they meant, quietly, meekly. I wiped my tears, a different kind of fire igniting within, fierce and consuming. They think I'm worthless? I'll show them. I'll show them all. I'll show them what worthless truly means when I'm done. The days that followed were a blur of frantic activity and simmering rage. My carefully constructed plans had been demolished, and I was left sifting through the rubble. First, I called the universities begging for extensions on deposit deadlines, explaining a sudden financial hardship without revealing the humiliating truth. Sympathy was offered, but deadlines were firm. My dream schools slipped through my fingers like sand. I hit the library not for textbooks, but for scholarship directories. I applied for everything I remotely qualified for, obscure essay contests, grants for students with red hair, I dyed it temporarily, anything. The rejection emails piled up faster than the applications went out. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be, Sophia, Wallace said one evening when he found me hunched over my laptop, surrounded by financial aid forms. Just go to the community college, it's good enough. Good enough for who, Dad? I shot back, my voice tight. Not for me. He just snorted and walked away. I took on a second job, then a third. Mornings, I was a waitress at a greasy spoon diner, slinging hash browns and enduring leering comments for pitiful tips. Afternoons, I shelved books at the local library, the quite a stark contrast to the diner's chaos. Evenings, I tutored high school kids in math, my brain aching from the constant switching gears. Sleep became a 4-hour luxury, often interrupted by nightmares of that zero on my bank statement. One Saturday, exhausted after a double shift, I saw Renee cruising down Main Street in a flashy, brand new sports car. He had on designer sunglasses and a smirk that made my stomach churn. My stolen future, right there, gleaming under the sun. He didn't even glance my way. My parents' calls became infrequent, and when they did ring, it was usually Aurora. Sophia, dear, she'd begin, her voice hesitant. Your father and I were just wondering, are you being difficult on purpose? This whole college thing? Difficult, I'd interrupt, my voice dangerously low. You stole $18,000 from me? What part of that am I supposed to be easy about? The line would usually go quiet, followed by a sigh and a mumbled, well, Renee's venture's looking very promising. Click. Eventually, a small, underfunded state college offered me a partial scholarship. It wasn't my dream, not even close, but it was a lifeline. I grabbed it. I moved into a cramped dorm room with peeling paint and a roommate who snored like a freight train. I ate ramen noodles and day-old bread, but I was there. I was in college. And I worked. I worked like my life depended on it, because it did. Every class, every assignment, every exam was a battle. The memory of Wallace's dismissive, he's the one with real potential, became my fuel. I would show them potential. I aced every course, my grades a silent, furious rebuttal to their betrayal. I volunteered for extra projects, joined the economics club, debated professors. I was a machine, powered by caffeine and spite. One afternoon, after I particularly challenged him in an advanced economics seminar, Professor Davies asked me to stay behind. He was an older man, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for being brilliant but tough. He was also, I'd later learn, well-connected. His real name was Alistair, but everyone just called him Professor Davies. "Sophia," he said, peering at me over his spectacles, "your work is exceptional. Your drive, it's palpable." I just nodded, unsure where this was going. "You argue like a seasoned analyst, not an undergraduate. What's your plan after graduation?" "I haven't thought that far ahead, sir," I admitted. "Just getting through this is the focus." He leaned back in his chair. "I used to work in finance, investment banking. It's a brutal world, not for the faint of heart, but for someone with your intellect and tenacity, it can be very rewarding." I thought of Renee's sports car, my parents' casual cruelty. Rewarding. I liked the sound of that. "I know someone," he continued, "Phoebe Holland. She's a senior partner at a boutique firm downtown. They run a highly competitive internship program. It's a long shot, but I could make a call. Suggest she look at your resume." My heart gave a hopeful leap. Finance, a world of money, of power, a world so far removed from greasy spoons and stolen dreams. Professor Davies watched me, his expression serious. "You have the grit, Sophia," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "The question is, do you have the stomach for it?" I met his gaze, the image of my father's cold eyes flashing in my mind. "Professor," I said, a new kind of determination hardening my voice, "I think I was born with the stomach for it. Phoebe Holland did more than just look at my resume. She grilled me for 2 solid hours in an interview that felt more like an interrogation. She was sharp, impeccably dressed, and didn't suffer fools. I walked out of her office convinced I'd blown it, but a week later an offer letter arrived. The internship was mine. Graduation was a muted affair. My parents didn't attend. They said Renee had a critical business meeting that day they couldn't miss. I didn't care. I had my degree, summa cum laude, and a foot in the door of a world they couldn't even comprehend. The internship was everything Professor Davies had warned, and more. The hours were brutal, often 16-hour days fueled by stale coffee and the adrenaline of high-stakes deals. The environment was a shark tank. Everyone was ambitious. Everyone was out for themselves. I thrived on it. The memory of Wallace's words, "He's the one with real potential," was a constant goad. I learned fast, absorbed everything, volunteered for the toughest assignments. 6 months later, they offered me a junior analyst position. I was in. News from home trickled in, usually via a gossipy aunt who still called occasionally. Renee's "sure thing," some kind of exotic pet breeding scheme, I gathered, had imploded spectacularly. Apparently, the imported Amazonian tree frogs hadn't taken well to the climate, or perhaps it was the fact he'd forgotten to feed them. My aunt mentioned with a certain grim satisfaction that Wallace and Aurora had lost a considerable sum. One evening my phone rang. It was Aurora. "Sophia, darling," she began, her voice unnaturally bright. "How are you? We haven't heard from you in ages." "I've been busy, Mom," I said, my tone flat. I was poring over spreadsheets for a merger proposal, my eyes burning. "Oh, of course, your important job," she said, a hint of something I couldn't quite place. Was it sarcasm or bitterness? "Well, listen, dear, things have been a little tight around here lately. Your father's hours got cut back, and with Renee's little setback." I knew where this was going. "What do you want, Mom?" "Well, we were just wondering if you could, help out a little. Just until Renee gets his next venture off the ground. He has some brilliant ideas." The audacity of it stole my breath. "Help out?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. After you emptied my college fund for his last brilliant idea? Are you serious?" "Now, Sophia, don't take that tone," she chided. "It was an investment. Sometimes investments don't pan out. That's business." "No, Mom," I said, my voice like ice. "That was theft, and the answer is no. I won't give you a dime." I hung up before she could reply, my hand trembling with a fresh wave of anger, the sheer unmitigated gall. A few months later, I was finally making enough to consider moving out of the tiny shared apartment I'd endured since starting my job. I applied for a modest one-bedroom in a safer neighborhood. The letting agent ran a standard credit check. He called me a few days later, his voice hesitant. "Miss Thompson, Sophia, there are a few discrepancies on your credit report." "Discrepancies?" I asked, my stomach clenching. "What kind?" "Well, there are several small personal loans, all from about 4 or 5 years ago, and a couple of credit cards. All of them are in default, with significant outstanding balances and late fees." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible," I said. "I've never taken out a loan. I only got my first credit card last year, and I pay it off every month." "The report says otherwise," he said gravely. "The accounts were opened when you were 18. They have your social security number, your date of birth." He emailed me the report. I stared at it, the black and white figures swimming before my eyes. 3 personal loans from shady-sounding payday lenders, 2 high-interest credit cards, both maxed out and charged off, all opened within weeks of my 18th birthday, right around the time my college fund had vanished. The dates aligned perfectly. My parents, they hadn't just stolen my savings. They had stolen my identity. They had forged my signature, saddled me with debt, and ruined my credit before I even had a chance to build it. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. It wasn't just callousness and favoritism anymore. This was fraud. This was a level of betrayal so profound, so calculated, it made my head spin. Holding the credit report, the paper crinkling in my shaking grip, the cold resolve I felt that night in my childhood bedroom solidified into something harder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. My path to revenge just got a lot clearer and a lot angrier. They hadn't just dismissed my dreams, they had actively tried to sabotage any chance I had of building a new life. They would pay for this, every single penny. The next few years were a relentless climb. The discovery of the fraudulent loans lit a new, more potent fire under me. It wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore, it was about building an arsenal. I left the small firm and was headhunted by a larger, more aggressive investment house, Sterling and Ross. They were known for their killer instincts and even bigger bonuses. It was exactly where I needed to be. I worked tirelessly, often sleeping on a couch in my office. I devoured financial reports, analyzed market trends, and cultivated a network of contacts. I learned to be ruthless in negotiations, to spot weaknesses, and to exploit opportunities. My reputation grew. They called me the shark behind my back, sometimes to my face. I didn't mind. Sharks survived. Sharks thrived. It was at Sterling and Ross that I met Judah. He was a junior analyst when I was a VP, whip smart, with an almost preternatural ability to dissect a company's financials and find the skeletons in their closets. He was quiet, observant, and fiercely loyal once he decided you were worth his time. He saw the drive in me, the same hunger, and we clicked. He became my right hand, my strategist, the one person I could trust implicitly in that cutthroat world. "Another all-nighter, Sophia?" he'd ask, finding me at my desk as dawn broke, a half-eaten container of takeout congealing beside a mountain of paperwork. "The price of success, Judah," I'd reply, rubbing my tired eyes. "This deal won't close itself." "It will if you collapse from exhaustion," he'd say, handing me a fresh coffee. "Pace yourself. It's a marathon, not a sprint." But for me, it always felt like a sprint, a desperate race against the ghosts of my past. Meanwhile, the news from the home front when it came was a steady drumbeat of decline. Renee, true to form, lurched from one failed venture to another. There was the artisanal pickle company, everything molded, the bespoke dog walking service. He was allergic to most breeds, and the ill-fated attempt to become a social media influencer. His only followers were Wallace and Aurora. Each failure chipped away at my parents' already precarious finances. They lost their savings first, then Wallace's pension fund, which he'd apparently cashed out to invest in Renee's pickle empire. Then went the second car. Aurora started calling more frequently, her voice no longer bright or chiding, but thin and strained. "Sophia, it's your mother." "I know, Mom. Caller ID." A hesitant pause. "I was just wondering if you might be coming home for Thanksgiving this year. It would mean so much to your father and me." "I'm busy, Mom. We're closing a big acquisition." Which was true. "Oh, well, maybe Christmas?" Doubtful. The calls became more pointed. "Sophia, we're really struggling here. Renee is trying his best, but things are difficult. Your father isn't well." I felt a flicker of something, not sympathy, more like a detached curiosity. "What's wrong with him?" "It's his nerves, mostly, the stress. He talks about family responsibility a lot." One evening I found a voicemail from Wallace. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in years. It was different. Thinner, lacking its usual bluster, and with a distinct tremor. "Sophia, it's Dad. Your mother told me you're doing very well. That's good. That's good." A long pause filled with static. "Things here, well, they're not so good. Renee, he had some bad luck. Again." Another sigh, heavier this time. I just, I was thinking, you know, family has a responsibility to each other. When times are tough, we, we could really use some help, Sophia. A loan, maybe, just to tide us over." His voice cracked on the last few words. "Call me." I listened to the message 3 times. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Family responsibility. He dared to speak to me of family responsibility after what they'd done. The man who told me I had no potential, who enabled the theft of my future and the fraudulent destruction of my credit, was now appealing to my sense of familial duty? I almost laughed. Instead, I deleted the voicemail. My detachment was almost complete, a cool, hard shell around the old wounds. They had made their choices. Now they were living with them. A few weeks later, my aunt called again, her voice hushed with drama. "Sophia, you won't believe it. Wallace and Aurora, they're going to lose the house. The bank is threatening foreclosure." The house. The house where I grew up. The house where they sat me down and told me my dreams didn't matter, that Renee was the one with potential. The house where they plotted to steal not just my savings, but my identity. A grim, cold satisfaction flickered deep inside me. It was a start. But as I stared out of my corner office window overlooking the glittering cityscape that I had fought tooth and nail to conquer, a bigger, far more intricate idea began to form. Losing the house was just an event. I wanted something more. I wanted a reckoning. Sterling and Ross was always on the hunt for undervalued assets, companies ripe for acquisition and restructuring. It was the core of our business model. One Monday morning during our weekly strategy meeting, the head of M&A, a bulldog named Marcus, threw a new prospect onto the table. "Northwood Mutual," he announced, tapping a glossy prospectus. "Mid-sized regional bank. Solid customer base, but they overextended on commercial real estate loans just before the downturn. Now they're bleeding capital. Management's looking for a white knight, a quick buyout before the regulators start circling." The name didn't immediately register. I made a note, along with half a dozen other potential targets discussed that morning. Later that week, I started my preliminary due diligence. I pulled up Northwood Mutual's public filings, their recent press releases, analyst reports, standard procedure. Then I delved into their non-performing loan portfolio, the debts unlikely to be repaid. My eyes scanned the columns of figures, the names of defaulting businesses and individuals. And then I saw it, a series of consolidated loans, flagged as high risk, attributed to Wallace T., Aurora T., and Renee T. The address listed was my childhood home. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through me. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart hammering. Northwood Mutual. This was it. This was the bank holding the mortgage on their house. This was the bank they owed for Renee's endless, disastrous ventures. The bank that was about to foreclose on them. The sheer cosmic irony of it was staggering. The opportunity laid out before me like a banquet. Judah, I called, my voice tight. Get in here and bring your shovel. I think I found something. He appeared in my doorway a moment later, a questioning look on his face. Shovel? Metaphorical, I said, gesturing to my screen. Northwood Mutual. I want you to dig into their loan portfolio, specifically any accounts linked to the names Wallace, Aurora, or Renee T. Cross-reference addresses, everything. Personal vendetta, boss? He asked, a slight smile playing on his lips as he peered at the screen. Let's just call it personal interest, I replied, my own smile thin and cold. See what you can unearth. I want to know everything about their dealings with this bank. Judah was nothing if not thorough. 2 days later, he walked into my office, a sheaf of papers in his hand and a grim expression on his face. You were right to be interested, he said, laying the files on my desk. It's messy, very messy. I picked up the top sheet. It detailed the original mortgage, then a series of refinances, each one pulling out more equity. Then came the business loans co-signed by Wallace and Aurora for Renee T. Enterprises, a name that changed with each new doomed scheme. The debt load was astronomical, far exceeding the value of the house. Standard incompetence and bad judgment, I murmured, flipping through the pages. This is what I expected. Keep reading, Judah said quietly. The last few loan applications are creative. I turned to the most recent files. These were applications for additional lines of credit, submitted just months before Northwood's troubles became public knowledge. The collateral listed was inflated to ludicrous levels. Appraisals for non-existent assets, financial projections for Renee's ventures that belonged in a fantasy novel. They were trying to squeeze more blood from a stone that was already dry, I said, a knot tightening in my stomach. More than that, Judah said, pointing to a particular section. Look at these supporting documents, the signatures on some of these guarantees. They don't quite match earlier examples. And these business valuations? We ran a quick check. The companies they cited as comparables, some don't exist. Others are shell corporations. My breath hitched. Are you saying? I'm saying it looks like they were attempting to secure these last loans using falsified documents and potentially forged signatures, Judah stated, his voice flat. They were desperate, and they were getting reckless, borderline fraudulent, if not outright. He tapped a final document, an internal memo from a Northwood loan officer, Clyde Watts, expressing serious concerns about the validity of Renee's latest application, recommending it be declined and flagged for further review. That review, it seemed, had been cut short by the bank's own spiraling crisis. They weren't just unlucky victims of circumstance, I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place with cold, hard precision. They were actively trying to defraud the bank to keep Renee's fantasy alive, even as it was all crashing down around them. Any lingering shred of doubt, any microscopic speck of pity I might have unconsciously harbored, evaporated. This wasn't just about a stolen college fund anymore. This was about a pattern of deceit, of entitlement, of a willingness to destroy anything and anyone to protect their precious failing son. Judah watched me, his expression unreadable. This changes things, Sophia. This bank isn't just a target, it's a weapon. They weren't just incompetent, they were playing dirty. This bank needs us. And you. Oh, he trailed off, but his meaning was crystal clear. I looked down at the damning files, at the evidence of their desperation and deceit. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Yes, Judah, I said, my voice soft but filled with a chilling certainty. It does change things. This isn't just business anymore. It's destiny. The Northwood Mutual acquisition became my singular focus. I assembled my A team, with Judah as my second in command. We worked around the clock, dissecting Northwood's financials, identifying synergies, and structuring a deal that was aggressive yet strategically sound. My mentor, Phoebe, now a senior partner at Sterling and Ross, and on the acquisitions committee, watched my performance with keen interest. You're particularly driven on this one, Sophia, she remarked one late evening, finding me still hunched over a complex spreadsheet in the otherwise deserted office. More so than usual? It's a good opportunity, Phoebe, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Undervalued, mismanaged, ripe for a turnaround. And the fact that it's a regional bank in your old stomping grounds? She asked, a knowing glint in her eye. Purely coincidental, I presume. I offered a small, noncommittal smile. The numbers are what matter, and the numbers on Northwood are compelling. She nodded slowly. They are. Your proposal is aggressive but brilliant. You've certainly got the killer instinct for this. Just ensure all your due diligence is watertight. No surprises. There won't be any surprises for us, Phoebe, I assured her, thinking of the secret file Judah had compiled on my family's dealings with the bank. The only surprises would be for them. The negotiations with Northwood's board were tough but swift. They were desperate, and our offer, while not generous, was their only viable escape route from total collapse. I made sure my name was front and center on every key document, every press release draft, every internal memo outlining the transition plan. Sophia Thompson, Vice President, Sterling and Ross, lead architect of the Northwood Mutual acquisition. Let there be no doubt who was pulling the strings. As the deal moved towards its inevitable close, the legal teams began their work. Standard procedure involved notifying major debtors of the change in ownership and outlining new terms or settlement discussions. Northwood's largest, most problematic non-performing loans, my family's among them, were prioritized. The notification letters for the Thompson accounts are ready to go out, Sophia, Judah informed me one morning, placing a file on my desk. Standard template, summons for a meeting to discuss outstanding liabilities and the bank's new restructuring plan under new ownership. I picked up one of the letters addressed to Wallace and Aurora. The formal, impersonal language was perfect. No hint of the personal cataclysm about to unfold for them. Send them, I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the fierce, exultant thrumming in my chest. Registered mail, signature required. Judah nodded. They'll receive them by Friday. We can schedule their consultation for next week. Boardroom C? Boardroom A, I corrected. The main one. I want them to have the full experience. A flicker of understanding, perhaps even a hint of grim satisfaction, crossed Judah's face. Boardroom A it is. The days leading up to that scheduled meeting crawled by with agonizing slowness. I went through the motions of my other work, attended meetings, signed off on reports, but my mind was elsewhere. It was in that house, imagining Wallace opening the official-looking envelope, his face paling as he read the cold, legalistic prose. I pictured Aurora wringing her hands, her anxiety mounting. I imagined Renee, perhaps, trying to bluster his way through it, assuring them he'd handle it, completely oblivious to the fact that he was about to walk into a meticulously laid trap. The anticipation was a tight burning coil in my stomach. This wasn't just about money anymore, or even about the house. This was about accountability. This was about them facing the consequences of their actions, not at the hands of some faceless institution, but at mine, the daughter they had dismissed, discarded, and defrauded. Phoebe, sensing the undercurrents, though not the full extent of them, offered a piece of advice. Remember, Sophia, when you hold all the cards, the most powerful move is often quiet confidence. Let them see the strength, not the struggle it took to get there. I appreciated her counsel, even if she didn't understand the depths of this particular game. Quiet confidence. Yes, I could do that. I had been practicing for this moment in one way or another for over a decade. The day before the scheduled meeting, Judah confirmed receipt of the signed delivery confirmations. They got the letters, Sophia. They know they have to show up. Good, I said, looking out at the city lights. Let them stew in it for one more night. I almost couldn't wait to see their faces. The shock, the dawning comprehension, the utter helpless realization that their fate was now, quite literally, in my hands. The daughter they thought had no potential was about to demonstrate exactly how much she had cultivated, all thanks to their initial devastating lesson. The air in boardroom A was cool, almost frigid, despite the late spring warmth outside. I sat at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, Judah to my right, Phoebe to my left. A junior associate, Sarah, sat discreetly to one side, ready to take notes. The silence was heavy, expectant. I smoothed the lapel of my charcoal gray suit, my composure a carefully constructed fortress. The door opened and Clyde Watts, the nervous-looking Northwood loan officer whose memo Judah had found, ushered them in. First Wallace, his shoulders slumped, his face etched with lines of worry and defeat I'd never seen before. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd laid eyes on him. Then Aurora, clutching a worn handbag to her chest, her eyes darting around the opulent room, wide and fearful. And finally, shuffling in behind them like a recalcitrant child, was Renee. He avoided eye contact with everyone, his usual swagger completely absent, replaced by a pasty, sullen apprehension. They looked at the assembled executives, the stern faces, the expensive suits. Then their gazes traveled to the head of the table, to me. Time seemed to freeze. Wallace's jaw literally dropped, his eyes widened, then blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear a faulty image. Aurora gasped, a small, strangled sound, her hand flying to her mouth, the handbag slipping from her grasp and thudding softly onto the plush carpet. Renee, who had been staring at his shoes, finally looked up. His face went from pale to a sickly green. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Or, perhaps, something far worse. I let the silence stretch, a delicious, agonizing pause. I watched the shock ripple across their faces, followed by a dawning, horrified comprehension. I savored it. Every micro-expression, every flicker of disbelief and terror. This single moment was worth more than all the money in their defaulted loans. Finally, when the tension was almost unbearable, I spoke. My voice was cool, steady, devoid of any discernible emotion. Mr. and Mrs. T, I began, deliberately using the formal address from the loan documents. Renee, welcome. Please have a seat. I gestured to the 3 empty chairs directly across the vast expanse of mahogany from me. They moved stiffly like marionettes with tangled strings and sank into the plush leather chairs. They looked small, insignificant, swallowed by the grandeur of the room. I'm Sophia Thompson, I continued, my eyes locking onto Wallace's, then Aurora's, then Renee's. Lead partner on the Sterling and Ross acquisition of Northwood Mutual. We're here today to discuss your considerable outstanding liabilities to this institution. Sarah placed a neatly bound file in front of each of them. The top page was a summary of their total debt, a figure so large it seemed to suck the remaining air from the room. As you can see, I went on, my tone relentlessly professional, the situation is dire. Multiple defaulted loans, significant arrears, and, as our recent due diligence has uncovered, I paused, letting my gaze linger on Renee, some rather questionable attempts to secure further credit using falsified information and inflated collateral values. Renee flinched as if struck. Wallace's face, if possible, grew even grayer. Aurora looked like she might faint. Normally, I said, in a situation like this, with debts of this magnitude and a history of creative accounting, the bank's position would be immediate foreclosure and pursuit of all available assets to recoup losses, which frankly wouldn't even begin to cover what you owe. I let that sink in. The silence was broken only by Aurora's shaky breathing. However, I continued, Sterling and Ross, as the new owner of Northwood Mutual, is prepared to offer a lifeline. A flicker of desperate hope appeared in Aurora's eyes. Wallace leaned forward slightly. We will not immediately foreclose on your primary residence, I stated. You will be allowed to remain in the house. Aurora let out a small sob of relief. Under certain very strict conditions, I added, my voice hardening, your finances will be subject to a rigorous oversight program, managed directly by this bank. Every penny of income, every expenditure will be monitored and approved. All non-essential assets will be liquidated. Any income Renee generates from any source will be garnished at a significant percentage until his portion of the debt is cleared. I looked directly at Renee. That means you will need to secure actual verifiable employment, Renee, the kind that issues a paycheck. Your days of ventures financed by your parents are over. His face crumpled, a mask of petulant outrage warring with fear. There will be no luxuries, no unnecessary travel, no new debts incurred of any kind. You will live on a budget so tight it will squeak. This arrangement will remain in place for as long as it takes to satisfy a significant portion of the outstanding principal. It will be years, potentially decades. I leaned back in my chair. These terms are non-negotiable. This is the only offer on the table. The alternative is immediate eviction and legal proceedings for the full amount, including pursuit of deficiency judgments that will follow you for the rest of your lives. The room was deathly quiet. The lifeline was clearly a noose, just one that tightened slowly. Wallace, his voice a hoarse, broken whisper, finally spoke. He looked directly at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief, despair, and a dawning, terrible understanding. Sophia, why are you doing this? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, my gaze unwavering. Because, Dad, I said, my voice soft, yet carrying the weight of all those years of bitterness and resolve, echoing his own dismissive words from a lifetime ago. I'm the one with the real potential, and you're all about to learn the true excruciating cost of underestimating it. Their faces. Wallace's ashen, Aurora's tear-streaked, Renee's a mask of impotent fury and terror, were a perfect silent tableau of despair, my masterpiece. The ink dried on the agreements, each signature a nail in the coffin of their old lives. Wallace's hand trembled so violently he could barely form the letters of his name. Aurora wept silently, dabbing at her eyes with a crumpled tissue. Renee scrawled his name with a sullen fury, then threw the pen down on the table. Clyde Watts, looking immensely relieved to be out from under their problematic accounts, gathered the documents with an almost reverent air. My team will be in touch to begin the asset liquidation and budget implementation process next week, I informed them. my voice devoid of triumph, merely stating a fact. You will cooperate fully. Any deviation will result in immediate nullification of this agreement. They nodded, too broken to argue, too terrified to protest. They filed out of boardroom A, shadows of their former selves, leaving behind only the faint scent of Aurora's cheap perfume and the heavy silence of their defeat. Phoebe looked at me, a complex expression on her face. That was comprehensive, Sophia? They made their choices, Phoebe, I replied, gathering my own papers. Now they live with them. Indeed, she said softly, you certainly have a tenacity about you, and a very, very long memory. She paused. The Northwood deal is going to be a huge win for the firm, and for you. That was always the plan, I said. Judah walked with me back to my office. Well, he said, a rare smile touching his lips, that was a reckoning for the ages. It was necessary, I replied, sinking into my chair, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb, leaving a strange sense of calm in its wake. They won't even try to fight it, will they? They can't, I said. The evidence of their attempted fraud with Northwood, which we now possess, gives us all the leverage we need. They know that. They'll comply, bitterly, resentfully, but they'll comply. And they did. The following week saw the swift dismantling of their comfortable, if debt-ridden, existence. The second car, already old, was sold for a pittance. Aurora's collection of porcelain dolls, Wallace's golf clubs, Renee's ridiculous assortment of gaming consoles and collectible sneakers all went to auction. Their lives were stripped back to the bare essentials, every expenditure scrutinized by an accountant from our newly acquired bank. Renee, true to my word, was forced to find work. After several false starts, he was fired from a fast food job for attitude problems and quit a warehouse position after 2 days, complaining it was too physical. He eventually landed a job as a night cleaner in an office building. The irony was not lost on me. The boy with all the potential was now scrubbing toilets. There were no apologies from any of them. Not a single word of remorse for the stolen college fund, the forged signatures, the years of deceit. Instead, there was a simmering resentment, a sullen compliance that was, in its own way, more satisfying than any tearful confession. They knew they were beaten. They knew who had beaten them, and they knew why. The burning anger that had fueled me for so long began to cool, replaced by a profound, almost serene sense of closure. Justice, cold and precise, had been served. The revenge was as complete as I had envisioned, perhaps more so because it wasn't a single explosive act, but a systemic dismantling of their lives, a slow, grinding consequence of their own making, orchestrated by me. My career, as Phoebe predicted, soared. The Northwood acquisition was hailed as a masterstroke. I was promoted to senior partner. The wound of their betrayal, I realized, would always be a scar. It was part of my history, part of what had forged me, but it no longer dictated my pain. It had been transmuted, alchemized into a source of undeniable power, a testament to my resilience. One evening, months later, Judah and I were working late, finalizing another deal. You ever hear from them? He asked casually, looking up from his screen. Indirectly, I said. My aunt still calls sometimes. Apparently Wallace has taken up gardening. Aurora knits. Renee complains. A lot. Happy? Judah asked, his gaze direct. I considered it for a moment. Satisfied, I corrected. There's a clarity now. I built an empire from the ashes of their discard. They live in the shadow of their mistake, a constant daily reminder of what they did and who they did it to. He nodded. That's a powerful kind of victory. It was. The consequence for them was a life constrained, their arrogance shattered, their entitlement ground into dust. The consequence for me was the undeniable, unshakable truth that I had not only survived their cruelty but had harnessed it, turning their betrayal into the very fuel that propelled me to a height they could never have imagined, even in Renee's wildest get-rich-quick fantasies. I am Sophia Thompson. I am the architect of my own destiny, and as it turned out, theirs too. The victory wasn't just about their downfall, but about my rise, forged in the very fire they had set to burn my future. And that, I realized, looking out at the glittering, sprawling city I had made my own, was the most complete and deeply satisfying revenge of all.